Hi, I'm Helen McCabe, Managing Director and founder of FW. I began life as a journalist, held senior roles in newspapers, edited Australia's largest magazine, and in 2018, I launched my own business. FW is dedicated to helping women navigate their working lives. But I've made my share of mistakes, especially as a leader. In this series, I go in search of answers to often complex leadership challenges. I explore the latest thinking on how to be a great leader and return to the tried and true methods to better understand what works and in what situations. I met my next guest when she was barely 20 years old. Straight away, she stood out as a young leader with drive and determination. And we've stayed in touch in the years since. Ruby Riethmuller is the founder and CEO of Womn-Kind, a youth-led mental health platform. She launched the platform in 2020 after struggling with anxiety as a teenager and coming to terms with her own identity as LGBTQ in a small country town. She's also a regional health advocate and Deputy Commissioner at the New South Wales Mental Health Commission. In this episode, we talk about how she chooses to be brave. And just a note, we had some tech issues during the record, so you might notice the audio quality change just slightly. But don't let it distract you from the interview. Ruby, welcome to the Leadership Podcast. Before I kick off, congratulations on being a finalist in the recent New South Wales Young Australian of the Year. That's pretty enormous. Tell me what that means to you.
It was definitely a surreal moment, and I think that it was really meaningful, not because of like the accolade or the recognition, but more for what it represented. Like, I think that as a young person, the things that I felt kind of disqualified me from leadership are the things that have got me to that point of recognition. You know, growing up on a farm in regional Australia, navigating anxiety and my identity as LGBTQIA+, I feel like that kind of recognition really speaks to my own story, but also the movement that Womn-Kind has created.
Well, I just don't know who beat you, to be honest. Like, it feels to me like you were shortchanged because you didn't actually win it. Can I say that? Or is that just not part of the spirit of these sort of competitions?
No, especially being up against Ned Brockman in the Young Australian of the Year for New South Wales, I was like, he literally ran across Australia and did it for the most amazing cause. Like, I couldn't run 5 kilometers if I had to. Well, I mean, I could, but I wouldn't want to. So I think that the work that he's doing is so incredible. And if nothing else, it's just so nice to expand your network of all these amazing people, and as well from all ages. Like, the people that I spoke to that day had 5 years experience, had 6 years experience. And yeah, the wisdom that we left with was really, really cool.
I don't care, Ruby. I am still disappointed that you didn't win, and I am super biased. Now, I feel super biased about you because I met you. I just tell our listeners that when Ruby came on, I said, look at you, you're all grown up. Because I met you, how many years ago? When you were like 22 years old.
Yeah, it would have been like 6 years ago, right at the start of my journey. I honestly remember that the Future Women Rural Leadership Program was one of the first things that I applied for. And I remember, that thinking like, oh gosh, what am I doing applying for this? And when I got it and spent the time at the summit, it was truly transformational. And I'm not just saying that because I'm speaking to you. Like, I walked away from those 2 days just feeling like I can do anything. And so I'm so excited to be coming to the summit this year. And I'm sure we'll leave with that kind of inspiration, motivation, focus.
Well, you're not only coming to the summit, you're speaking at the summit. So, it's worth me just pausing for a minute and saying that, you stood out as a leader in that intake. I've presided over dozens of intakes. I don't know how many people I've met. I don't really want to think about it. But you really stood out really early on. And so I'm excited to be talking to you today about leadership from a young age. Let's go back a little bit. And it was in 2020. As you say, you grew up in a country town. Were you on a farm, Ruby? I forget.
I grew up on a farm just outside of Wagga Wagga.
Well, and I probably identified a bit with that because I also grew up on a farm outside of Hamley Bridge in South Australia. So I identify with that sort of feeling of being in a farm and being in a rural area, and that the cities are big smokes and they're a long way away, and that's where all the stuff happens. What prompted you to kick off and launch Womn-Kind? Because that's a pretty big shift? Is it just the kind of the enthusiasm of youth? And if you knew better, you would have done it?
I definitely think there's a part of that. Like, if I knew what it took to start and run an organization now, I'm not sure I probably still would have. But really, one of the light bulb moments for me was I was at Toolies, which is what my friends call schoolies. We do it every year after schoolies. We go away for a weekend. We really try and make a habit of it. And a couple of years out of school, we all kind of just happened to talk about the things that we navigated during high school and those really formative years. And, not just things like breakups, but things that were really hard and you wouldn't expect a teenager to be navigating, and especially not your friends. And so I think that when we were having those conversations and there was enough distance away from our teenage years to be able to be honest and vulnerable, it really became clear that, very ironically, our generation is isolated from each other by the feelings and experiences and things that we have in common. So that took me down a rabbit hole of learning about what supports were out there, learning about the mental health system more broadly. And it wasn't until one of my friends said, either do something about it or stop talking like you could, because we both know that you can. And I was kind of like, she's so right. There's no harm in trying. And it was during COVID where I feel like we had more time to play around with different ideas. And I guess the first step was just looking at my immediate circle of people and thinking, who could help me get closer to the impact that I wanted to create. And whenever I met with someone, whether it was a family friend or an old teacher, I asked them, can you recommend 3 people that I can speak to who will get me closer to my goal? And so the conversations just started to evolve. And at the start, obviously, when you're building an organization, you're doing a lot of the doing yourself. And so with that, there was obviously a lot of learning. But I do think it was just a little bit of naivety, but also having that real passion and wanting to create the organization that I didn't have access to for the people that follow in my footsteps.
It's so interesting, because when I first met you, I really did relate to you, even though there was decades in age difference. But I was 2 or 3 years into a business as well, and had no clue what I was doing, wouldn't have probably done it if I knew how hard it was to do, all those sorts of things. But I was really blown away by your determination. I want to get to leadership, so let's jump forward. Tell me where Womn-Kind is today.
Womn-Kind today has supported over 35,000 young people, and over 65% of those young people are based in regional, rural and remote communities, which has always been a goal of mine, to make sure that people who are living outside of the city have the same opportunity to access quality care as their metropolitan peers. But we've also support young people from over 37 countries. So we do that via the Womn-Kind app and other digital tools that we have developed, but also by going into schools and communities and running wellbeing workshops, but also leadership workshops and workshops that really help young people develop that sense of belonging. So we're still very much a small organisation. We consider ourselves a social enterprise where everything that we make in the business is reinvested back into the communities that we support.
So just for a minute, when you say we, who are you talking about?
We, at the moment, is myself and then a group of volunteers, and also I think we have 4 part-time people that support the work that we're doing.
Okay, gotcha. All right, let's go back a bit. I also want to just pick up on your challenges around identity in a country town. Talk to me about how that experience has shaped you as a leader and shaped your business model.
So when I was about 16, I started exploring my identity as LGBTQA+. It was very confusing. It was very isolating, and it was really lonely. And I feel like that in that experience, I held a lot of shame. I feel like now leading an organization that encourages young people to be true to themselves, I've also grown up with Womn-Kind, learning that I too am enough as I am, and that I can exist with my whole identity, and that part of my identity is probably the least significant part of the person that I am. So I feel like at the start of Womn-Kind, there was almost this resistance because I didn't believe myself in the message that I was trying to get other young people to believe in. So it wasn't until I was probably 24 or 25 that I felt comfortable to let that part of myself be known. And that was after 9 years of being hidden in that part of my identity to everyone. No one knew that except the people that I'd been in relationships with, and I found that really, really hard.
So apologies if I'm assuming incorrectly here, but you had mental health challenges as a young person. Were they linked to the identity challenges or were they separate?
For sure. They were very clearly linked, but nobody knew at the time. So everyone was like, Ruby has anxiety, but she, has a roof over her head. She has a great education. She has all these friends. She has a great family. Like, people didn't really understand because I was hiding that part of myself. But the anxiety came from that. Me being like, I have such a close circle of friends and family, but I have this big thing that I'm hiding from them. And like, what if all of my relationships change when they find out about me? What if people think of me as less funny, less intelligent, less capable? Like, I had all of these beliefs that I needed to navigate before I felt comfortable. I started working with a psychologist who has really helped me be able to lean into that identity. And now everyone I know and love knows that part of me. And I'm in a very supportive relationship with a woman, and it just is so, like, it's like the least interesting thing about me now. But definitely at the time, that anxiety came from this fear and shame and, just feeling like I was like living a double life without even meaning to or wanting to.
What is the biggest misconception older managers have about your generation's work ethic?
I think the biggest misconception is that Gen Z lacks work ethic, when in reality, I just think that we define it differently. Like, I do think that older generations often saw work ethic as like endurance, staying late, pushing through, being the last one at the desk. Whereas I think that Gen Z sees work ethic as more like intentionality. Like, we care deeply about purpose and psychological safety and impact and alignment. That I would say that my Gen peers, as a generalization, work incredibly hard, but they won't pour themselves into work that feels extractive or unsupported or disconnected from their own values. So I think that, like, sometimes they would be maybe told or thought of as lazy, but I think that it's more that they are discerning and thoughtful and they want to contribute to things that are meaningful instead of like burning out on performing, if that makes sense. So
No, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. Burning out was the thing we did at your age, and we prided ourselves in burning out. So no, it makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I know. I feel like there is this shift, and I feel like maybe Gen Z are leading it. They're like, no, we're like getting a massage and we're like doing acupuncture. I think for me personally, like, I felt really burnt out at the end of last year, and that was from doing too much, overcommitting. Like, I worked out that I spent like 47% of the year traveling, and this year I'm thinking about productivity a lot differently, and I feel like already I'm a lot more focused and I'm getting a lot more done, and it's of a lot higher quality because I do have stronger balance in my life.
So you're a leader. You said you've got a team of volunteers and you've got some part-time workers. What do you say to them if they say, "Oh, I need time out. I'm struggling, or I'm stressed, or just not going to come to that meeting today"?
I think it's tricky because the people in my team, like, I don't think that the people in my team, the quality of work is ever compromised by that. Like, I don't have people in my team who are saying I'm not well enough to come to that meeting, because I feel like the culture that I'm trying to build is like, it is all of our responsibilities to care for and prioritize our own well-being and mental health. That, like, I think balance means being able to show up for everything at work whilst doing things outside of work hours that mean that you can do that. And also, I feel like it's different. Like, I can't speak to any cultural workplace, because for us, hitting goals and getting things done is about a lot more than just a KPI in the work that we're doing. Like, I think that for my team, the incentive is less about closing the deal and more about knowing that by doing so, it's the difference between thousands of girls accessing support they deserve as opposed to not.
Yep. Great answer. And as you were talking, I've got a masterclass with the FW community after this, and we're talking about leading younger team members and supporting the tomorrow's leaders. And when I say we did burn out, we burnt out, but we went to the pub or to lunch on Fridays and we didn't go back. So if you took that 5 hours of doing nothing on a Friday afternoon and spread it over the week,
True.
you'd probably get the same outcome.
That's so true.
How do you ensure your voice is heard? I mean, as we started out this podcast, I said you were part of a training program for young rural women, for rural women. You just happened to be young. And there were plenty of voices in that intake that were older and more experienced than you, but you made your voice heard throughout that program. Tell me a little bit about how you find your way into a conversation and make yourself known without necessarily being the showiest or the pushiest person in the room.
I'm definitely still learning about this, and I would love to get your thoughts on this offline and your advice. But I feel like naturally I'm more of an introverted person and I'm a really deep listener. So when it comes to meetings and big conversations, I'm often not the loudest person in the room. And at the start, I had insecurity about that because I kind of felt like my idea of leadership at the beginning was like the person who's talking and dictating the conversation and directing the conversation, whereas now I'm naturally more the person who listens and then hopes to add value when I do speak. But I am still trying to find that balance. Like even last week I had a meeting with about 10 other people and I'm newer to this group of people and this meeting, and I'm still finding that I'm feeling really intimidated in that setting. And it's not because of the people in the meeting, it's just this imposter syndrome. Everyone in the room is a lot older than me and they have a lot more years of experience. And so I am finding it hard to manage that imposter syndrome. But before the meeting, I felt nervous and I was like, all I want to achieve in this meeting is to add one piece of value. And to some people that probably sounds like nothing, but I walked away from the meeting having literally only spoken once, but I could feel proud of myself because that's the goal or the intention that I had set for myself. But I think it's just like flexing the muscle, like everything in life. It's a learned skill. Confidence for me isn't something that like always has come naturally. So it's just about trying to back yourself. And when you do speak and you have people say like, oh, that's a really interesting perspective, or like then you get that confidence to keep doing it.
Look, there's lots of points I'd make about that. But one, I think everyone lacks confidence at some point, and you can have it. You can walk into a meeting confident and then something happens and suddenly you lose it and it just vanishes from you and you don't know where it went or why it went, but it's just gone. Someone it's triggered something and you can find yourself struggling. I do think broadly though, Ruby, taking your time, establishing your credentials, listening to the room around you sets you up for success. You don't have to win the room in that first meeting. You've got a bunch of meetings to do that. And if you develop a reputation for only speaking when you have something to say, it's probably where you want to be ultimately. It's probably the reputation that you ultimately want to build. But as someone who's watched you for a while now, you do navigate most of these circumstances with, real emotional intelligence and real leadership. Can you talk about leaders that you admire or people that you've seen demonstrate the sorts of leadership skills that you'd like to work on or be like?
Oh, there's honestly so many young leaders. There's a young leader, Darian Brooker, who's the CEO of an organization called We Future Leaders. She's also using her lived experience to create really incredible change here in Australia. Marley Silva, I don't know how you say her last name, Kerr from Friends That Invest. She's got like an online platform that is particularly geared around showing women and girls how they can invest. I feel like there's just so many, and a lot of them are just showing up really authentically online and being really transparent with the journey of building and growing and owning and leading organizations. That I feel like exposing myself to leaders like that, especially having them on my news feed, it really normalizes the experience that some days are really hard, some days are really great, and some days are kind of just average. That I feel like the leaders that I look up to are the people that just like normalize that whole human experience, as opposed to just posting the highlight reels on LinkedIn or things like that. It doesn't feel, authentic to me.
I'm just going to go backwards a bit because I feel like I sort of missed a transition period. It's transition here. Anyone who listens to this podcast regularly knows that I can go down rabbit holes and then go backwards and forwards with kind of no real rhyme or reason. But I just want to understand, so you're growing up on the farm, you then have the challenges around how you fit in and navigating that. So that again pushes you into leading. You launch Womn-Kind, and then you have those early days where you're like, whoa, what am I doing? Is it really going to work? To today, where you're a finalist as Young New South Wales Woman of the Year, in that period of time, like, you obviously really started to embrace the concept that you're a leader. Can you go back to a moment where you kind of go, well, actually, I have this voice, I have this platform, I'm winning awards. Was there a moment where that something happened that you went, right, well, this is who I am, and I can talk about identity, I can talk about anxiety, and I'm going to run with this potentially for a pretty long period of time, if not all of my life?
Yeah, I feel like the more I lent into my authentic self and started telling really small bits and pieces about myself as a person and the different parts that make me who I am, the more that people actually kind of like took me seriously and felt connected to me. Like, I felt like the more that I lent into who I was, the more people actually respected me as a leader. And I just think that it's so crazy and ironic because there was a really significant period of my life, like years and years, that I truly believed wholeheartedly that I would never embrace my identity as LGBT. Like, I was just like, that will never be something that I do. And so to now be able to talk about that openly, but also to be in a role within government as a Deputy Commissioner for Lived Experience, directly influencing policies that impact the lives of people across New South Wales because of that lived experience, it is really crazy to think about. I don't remember there being a specific moment. I do remember we had a Womn-Kind event a couple of years ago, and it was the first time that I spoke about that part of myself, and I was so nervous, and I had written 2 speeches for the day, and I was like, I'm either going to choose to be brave or I'm going to be, lead with fear again. And I chose to be brave that day, and I spoke about the experience, and I think that there was about 100 people at the event, and I kid you not, probably 95 of them messaged me after and said that it either impacted them directly because they've been in a similar situation, or their friend has, or that they felt that they had connected to some part of my story in this way that felt really profound. And so I feel like having the support of my community and feeling closer to them because of that was a real reminder that, like, the leader that I want to be is the leader that I needed as a young person. So if I'm showing up and making her proud, I'm hopefully creating space for other young people to feel like they can embrace who they are as well.
I want to talk briefly about being brave then. If you in real time recognize that was brave and that you needed to be brave, how do you think about bravery now as a leader? And do you push yourself to be brave in your role today?
Definitely. I feel like if I'm ready for if I feel ready for an opportunity, I believe that I've already outgrown it. Like, I do not think any of us should be going into an environment or a space or an opportunity and feeling 100% ready to be in that space. That's just my opinion. But I do think that there is a threshold when it comes to bravery. Like, I don't believe in pushing yourself so far out of your comfort zone that it feels overwhelming, but I make a conscious effort to choose the brave option. As one example, I've got something coming up in June or something, and there was an opportunity to either have a video presented or to deliver a keynote or to do, I can't remember what the other option is. And I immediately was like, oh, well, I'm obviously doing the video. Like, I will be so scared to speak in front of 600 people and do this keynote about this topic. And I ended up putting my hand up for it, and they want me to do it now, which is great. But obviously I feel nervous in the lead up to that, but I knew that I had to do that because if I didn't do it, I would have just kept with the safe bet, and having that opportunity will obviously help me grow. So definitely bravery is something that I try and exercise on a relatively daily basis.
And I will just say to anyone listening, Ruby is going to do a speech at the FW International Women's Day Leadership Summit coming up. So she's going to be brave again.
Yeah.
But Ruby, being brave, with that comes risk, right? And it can backfire. Have you experienced the downside of bravery?
I definitely obviously there's been times that I've made like a lapse of judgment, especially in the early days, but I don't really feel like the moments that I've been brave as a leader have ever not resulted in a good outcome. Like, there have been times when I've been brave and put my hand up for opportunities and been knocked back, but I've never felt disappointed by that, or, I feel like you can only be disappointed when you don't try. Like, if you try and you fail, it doesn't bother me, and that's where I think the bravery comes into it. But I really don't think there's anything to lose when you choose to be brave, but you do it in a way that's true to yourself. I think being brave is stepping out of your own comfort zone, which is obviously subjective and it's incremental. Like, it's not like I would go from never having spoken in front of an audience to then speaking in front of 600 people as I will be in June or July. Like, I feel like it's all, I don't know, an evolution. But yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of challenges, especially in the early days, like lessons learned, but none of them I think have been a result of bravery, if that makes sense.
And I'm just going to, as I listen to you talk, say bravery is something that youth naturally have because you sort of don't know what you don't know. It's less risky to do brave things as a young person because you're expected to. So it is actually a gift in a way, the idea that you can just have a go at launching a business, because there is no downside for a young woman launching a business that doesn't work, because you had a go and you learned a bunch of things, right?
Exactly. And I feel like at the start, I was told on a few occasions, like, you're too young to pull something of a scale off, whatever, like all that doubt. But I felt like my age was actually the biggest advantage to the work that I was doing. And also at the time that I started it, I don't have kids. I didn't have a partner. I didn't have a mortgage. Like, I had this really unique opportunity to try something. And if it failed, like, then I'm probably more employable because I've had all these different experiences as a business owner than if I had have just like stuck on the conventional path.
Absolutely. And I will just say, the moment that you've got the children, the mortgage, the cat, the dog, responsibilities, it really gets hard.
For sure.
I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions to finish off. Best piece of feedback you've received in your career?
Oh gosh, I feel like to just give it a go. Like, at the start, I felt really scared to start a business, and I have reflected on it more lately, and I feel like the fear at the beginning actually came less from thinking that I couldn't do it, but actually more that thinking that I could do it and what would happen if I built this thing that was like way bigger than myself. I think like the best piece of advice was just to like give it a go. Like, you've got nothing to lose.
If you were running this country, what's the one thing you'd do?
I would make sure that as part of the curriculum, children of all ages were learning more about mental health, and that it was a priority, because we know that when we invest in prevention, when it comes to mental health, it costs the government a lot less in the long run.
Thank you for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. You're such an impressive person and leader. I can't wait to see what you do with the next 10 years. And I'll see you at the
Thank you
Leadership
so
Summit.
much. I can't wait. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you. All right. So in this season, I want to do something a little bit different, and I want to bring our super producer, Odessa Blaine, out from behind the desk and into the studio to give listeners some real tips and tricks about how to tackle your challenges as future leaders in your organizations. Odessa Blaine, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you in the podcast studio for the first time. Just quickly, tell our listeners, how did you come to be at FW and how many podcasts have you produced so far?
Thanks, Helen. It's great to be here. I came to be at FW after an interview with you about a year ago. I came from a news reporting background and I got thrown into the leadership podcast pretty much straight away. I'd say I'd be near the 50 episode mark by now. I should probably know, but I don't.
Can you recall any key leadership advice or interviews that have stuck in your mind?
Yes, putting me on the spot a
Of
little
course.
bit, but one that immediately jumps out is, and I was thinking about just the other day, was with Georgie Holt last season when she was talking to, and it was quite a small point she made, but she was talking about when you have to give someone hard news or have a difficult conversation with someone. And she said one of the most important things to do is to always give them options and choices in that moment.
So that they feel like they've got some agency over their next steps.
Yeah. So I feel like they've got some agency and also probably see you define the parameters a bit of what's to come next.
That was a great interview. Thank you. So we will be talking about some leadership tips and insights that we've learnt, that we've researched, but we'll also be answering questions from our listeners. Odessa, what's my first question?
Your first question, we've had a lot of people write in about one-on-one meetings. They want to know your tips, advice, thoughts. The one question that's come through is from a new manager who is setting up their first one-on-one meetings with their new direct reports, and they want to know what your general advice is about what makes a one-on-one effective.
Great question. Thank you. Well, firstly, every manager is different. And if you're listening to this podcast, then you're developing your style of leadership. I'm a very relaxed manager and I like to let my direct reports get on with their job. So I am really about just assisting them. However, not everyone is like me. So the way I recommend you go about it as a first leader is ask your direct report how they want the meeting to run, what they want out of the meeting. Once you've established that, set up an agenda, have 2 or 3 items that you go through every week or every fortnight, depending on how often you meet, and make sure that you give them a chance to run through the list of things that they need from you and potentially have some things you need from them. I also recommend considering a feedback loop where you have a standing item at the end of the agenda where you can say, hey, Odessa, perhaps you should work on this, and you did really well at that. So it's both a positive and a negative in every meeting, and it gives your direct report something to work on immediately. Does that help, Odessa?
Yes, that does. There are a couple of best practice notes in our Harvard Business Review article, and you ticked off quite a few of them. One of the ones you ticked off was having an agenda and also a standing item at the end. A couple of other points that were mentioned were to try and have a regular rhythm to the meetings. This serves a couple of purposes. One is particularly for newer employees, it can make them feel less anxious, less like it's a big thing and that a meeting's suddenly being dropped into their calendar. And the other reason is that it simply shows your employee that their time matters. If you do have to cancel, try to reschedule it straight away. And then, of course, a couple of quick points for at the meeting are to always be present, turn off notifications on your phone, listen more than you talk, and end well. A tip is to do the final 5 minutes to recap action items.
That's really good advice. And I've just stressed that every team member is a little bit different. I think leading is a bit like leading a football club or a football team. You have to adapt to each person.
It's a bit of give and take. So both, I think it's the responsibility of the manager to try and see what their employee is like and under what circumstances they can kind of get the most information from them. But it's also up to the employee to fit into their manager's working style.
Yes, I think the person that is best on this is Jamila Rizvi, who is always very articulate on the topic of your job is to make your boss's life easier. And while it's very important for a boss to be good at their job and good leaders, it is incumbent on an employee to understand what is going on in the organisation and the sorts of pressures that the leaders might be under, and to preempt them or to assist in them if and where possible. How many minutes should a one-on-one be? Should it be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or should you set aside an hour?
30 minutes is a good time. But of course, as you said at the top, Helen, it's different for every manager and employee. And some weeks there's more to discuss, other weeks there's less.
I'm going to make a point I often make in the leadership podcast, and that is to do best practice at all these things is actually quite time consuming. And if you had perfect one-on-one meetings and you had them at the intervals that your direct reports would want and for the time that your direct reports would like, there wouldn't be actually that much time left in your diary. So you do have to be pretty disciplined about these and frame them pretty clearly. As a new leader, it'll be really tempting to do lots of meetings and to give your staff a lot of time and to hear them out. But I do recommend starting how you intend to finish and keeping tight meetings, 15, 20, 30 minutes to should be enough once a week or fortnightly. But if you've got more senior staff or bigger projects, be ready to change those meetings up a little while the workload increases or is heavy for a bit, or we've got a particular project underway. But I do recommend a tight agenda. And as I say, think about a feedback loop.
Another question that we've had come through, Helen, that touches a different aspect of one-on-ones is someone was asking at what point should managers expect their one-on-ones with an employee to be confidential? Have you ever been in a situation where you've been surprised to find a bit of information you've shared has suddenly spread across the business?
I'm never surprised. I'm often disappointed that it has been, but I'm never really surprised because if it's absolutely human nature to want to share information and gossip or tidbits or insights. So every manager should be aware that any information that they divulge in a one-on-one is potentially going to be shared in across the business. So absolutely be prepared for that. But I do strongly recommend if there is confidential information being shared, you identify it early in the meeting. You repeat that at some other point in the meeting or during that conversation and probably reinforce it at the end of the meeting. But humans are humans. Sharing information is what we do. And as a leader, you need to be very mindful of that.
Now, we'll be doing this segment weekly. So if you have any questions, please send them through to hello@futurewomen.com. We also love voice notes. So if you'd like to send through a voice note, record on your phone, email it through, and I'll try to get to them.
Jessica Blaine, thank you so much for joining me this year. It's great to have you here. And as we get into the rhythm of this, I'm looking forward to some general feedback on my own leadership style as someone who reports directly to me. That should go really well for me, don't you think?
Yes, I will.
Just made you very uncomfortable.
I was thinking.
I was just thinking about my one-on-one style.
Yeah, stick to a regular rhythm. Maybe that's the regularity, the irregularity.
I just recommend making sure that you explain yourself. So if you're going to be hard to pin down and you're going to be away for the week, your direct reports should sort of be aware and psychologically prepared for their one-on-ones to be cancelled. I think that way it's not as you say, not as stressful if they're kind of aware that if their boss is on the road for a week, the chances of the one-on-ones taking place, is slim. Does that help?
Yeah. Yes. And it goes to the give and take about knowing your style and also your managers.
This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation. It was produced by Odessa Blaine, Susan Warby, and led by Paddy Andrews.